Oh, details for the bridge project.
Yes, so $5.
So let me know when we're live for news. I'd like to call this meeting of the school building committee to order at 6:36 PM. Roll call, Kristen Bagley.
Here.
Kristen Janusis. Ann Dixon. Anna Dosere Squitu.
Here.
Alita Hall. Christine Kennedy.
Here.
James Pearson.
Here.
Kim Shockley.
Here.
Amy Angeloni.
Here.
Mario Carreno. Don Cowart.
Here.
Stephen Angel. Russ Hill. Robert Savetti. Daniel Perillo.
Here.
Harold Sands. Hillary Lima. We have a quorum. Emergency evacuation procedures, you can head out the same way you came in or go out the back exit this way. Approval of the minutes, minutes were sent to you last week with our packets for April 19th, 2023. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion? Do I
I'll
hear a
second it.
Second, any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to item 4, bond finance update discussions.
So the reason why I put this on the agenda is because, the last meeting we had was before the town council meeting, where the bond was adjusted, so I thought it would be fair to the committee, for those that weren't able to attend, or may have questions, like this is, I get everybody sort of like up to speed on the same page.
So the council amended the bond act to 25 million. That bond act was then sent as a sub A to the General Assembly. And it's been introduced on both the Senate and the House side, and I'm told is moving through and expected to pass expediently. So that's where the bond piece stands from there. We then took that amount, forwarded on to Phil and Mario, and that leads into the next phase of our agenda this evening. So Phil, I don't know if you want to bring up your presentation.
Don has it already set up, I'll go ahead and pass that around. You want to go to the next slide, Don? It's pretty raw there. Yeah.
Wow, that's a big. Big.
All right, excellent. So this evening I will provide you an update on the stage 2. Discuss a proposed scope of work for a revised stage 2, the path forward, and we can discuss schedule and next steps. So the RIDE stage 2 that was submitted, we did complete the supplemental, but we did not submit it. Instead, notification was sent to the RIDE School Building Authority regarding the permit. To the next deadline, the next stage 2 submission deadline is September 15th. You would expect a December 2023 RIDE approval for that submission. And of course, we're happy to help and continue working with you going forward. So working with a revised RIDE stage 2 budget at 25 million, our suggestion would be to follow a first steps concept. And that is focusing on some high priority projects at the high school and at the middle school where they impact the most students, in fact, all the students eventually in Coventry. They're noticeable. They address some required statutory projects at the high school. It does protect one of your larger assets at the middle school. The remaining school projects, we focus really on just security and asset protection to the extent that we can. We'll go through that in this spreadsheet going forward. Our proposed breakdown for spending that $25 million is putting about 56% of it at the middle school, about 28% of it at the high school, then breaking down between Western Coventry at 5%, Washington Oak at 2%, and the 3 elementary schools at about 3%. That's not a lot of funding when we go through this chart. Go ahead, the next slide. So we're looking at the high school of 7 million, Western 1.25 million, Washington Oak 500,000, Hopkins Hill, Tyler, and Black Rock at 750, and the middle school at 14 million. And that's how we get to the total of 25 million.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
That's 7 million for Coventry High Schools from the initiative, the equity initiative grant. Am I correct on that? Oh, and the fire suppression.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you. That's all I need.
Next slide. So I gave you a handout so you wouldn't have to try to read the screen. So I want to walk through the handout just so you understand what our thinking was. So in the left-hand column are the abbreviations of the school. The second column is the total dollar amounts that we just reviewed. I broke down that top total amount into the hard cost and soft costs. This is what RIDE would allow. In reality, the hard cost is usually less than 80% and the soft costs are more than 20%, but this is the way RIDE would expect to see it. Then we have identified the scope of work at the schools based on this total dollar amount. So for example, at the high school, we want to do the FEI projects, gymnasium, auditorium, as much as we could do there. Some limited casework improvements at the science labs, the fitness center, which was part of the FEI, and the fire suppression system. At Western, we want to make sure we have addressed as much as we can this domestic water distribution issue, whether it's the well or whether it goes beyond the well because the well is already done or something like that. We want to focus on the water and making sure that the building is secure. And again, limited interior finishes or deferred maintenance.
If I could, just one point. So for this one, for the well, I've spoken to Jack Reed about 3 times already about a grant that's coming, a federal grant coming out in July. And he specifically is looking at to give it to communities who need public well work done. So this particular issue is on his radar, and I mentioned how it's built into the bond now. But if we can use that grant to pay for all of the well work instead, then there's obviously a great chance we can take that and put it into other schools.
Yep.
So just something to keep in mind. We should know more about that in July.
All right. At Washington Oak, there's not a lot of money there. I know there's some site work that this is just our recommendation. We can certainly flesh this out between now and September. And then at the 3 elementary schools, looking forward to maybe a larger plan in the future, you probably would not want to spend too much money at these 3 elementary schools. So let's make sure they're secure and let's do what we can to improve some of the finishes and any deferred maintenance items that are a priority. That brings us to the middle school, where we have projected the most in staying with that theme of first steps, recognizing that the middle school is probably not going anywhere. To do that kitchen and cafeteria project, extend it into improving the gymnasium, and then do any of those roof areas that need to be replaced, may be a good project at the middle school. It's a considerable one. It's taking up, like I said, over half of the money. But it does set you on the path forward of maybe doing a middle school project in the future. We also tried to look at what would sell in terms of a bond and exciting people. We know that sports works Hence the reason for focusing on the gym and taking the middle school opportunity to build upon the cafeteria and the gym, which is right next to it. Improving the cafeteria and kitchen space for the middle school. If you recall, we did have some renderings for these spaces that look good, tend to excite people. When you go to the next column called project priorities, if we look at the high school, we start with an immediate start upon funding approval. We can anticipate bidding, but not completing all the work by June. But having the completed bidding process done, that'll allow for sort of a fiscal review that may influence other projects. When you look at the chunk of work in the middle, those projects really could happen over the summers of 2024, 25, 26, depending upon how the high school bids have come back. But also go to the middle school, the last one. We could anticipate construction to start the summer of 2024, but that's just the roof piece. And that's okay, that's a separate contract. We would anticipate bidding being complete, though, for the other work by June of 2024. And a construction start in the fall of 2024 as a singular project. The kitchen cafeteria addition, improvements to the gym. And having that bid by June of 2024 would then influence how much work you can do at the other schools over the next several summers. We would anticipate construction would be complete of the middle school project by the spring 2026. Something to keep in mind, I think this is important. The last column, project delivery comments. So the high school projects and all the elementary school projects, they really want to be multiple, small to moderate general contracting or specialized trade contractors. Projects under 500,000 will go through a right expedited process. That doesn't matter. One's over 500 will go through the regular process. But this one is, the last point is important. Selection of the OPM will be critical to not overburden your school facilities director. So you have all these projects that you could be doing at the elementary schools and at the high school. Who is going to, in a big project, you could hire a construction manager, and they could oversee all of this. This is not construction manager work. These are small projects that, I think Russell, right? Russ could, we would develop documents, help with bidding and everything else. But you will have to have an OPM because of the value of all these. And it will be important to have the right OPM. There's a lot of OPMs out there, some big, some small. I think that will be important because otherwise Russ could quickly find himself buried over the next several summers if he's the only one trying to manage this. The middle school project, that really should just be a single GC project, general contractor, for all the scopes of work. That it's an addition, renovation, and work in the gym. That's the GC project. The roof project, that's a separate contractor by itself. So, you know, Steve, you should comment what you think of some of this as well as everybody else on the scope and.
I know there's not a lot of detail when it comes to the secure entrance pieces that you put for the elementary schools. But Don, wouldn't some of that have been covered in that 900,000 from last year?
So
So there could be additional things you can do. Yeah.
Not every floor.
Yeah.
We replaced a lot. So I think a lot of the entrances that
Yeah.
a lot of the elementary.
So they can do additional things at those schools.
Could we do taller windows or would that be on the scope of the project?
Well, at Western, we did plug in more where we think the windows are an issue. They're also an issue with these Hopkins Hill, all of them.
So if the doors are good, then put it toward the window.
I want to just be clear when I said limited,
Hmm.
so everyone understands that it's limited. That's all.
Yeah, so what do you mean when you talk about the gym improvements being limited? Like, what,
It seems like all or
what do you
nothing
fix, what
stuff
do you
in there,
not
yeah.
fix?
So at one point in the middle school, we were gonna replace all of that glass block.
Mhm.
That probably would,
So it'd probably be floor, maybe bleachers,
yeah, that's, yeah,
gotcha,
more aesthetics,
Adding
yeah. Lighting, if we needed to do lighting. There's a lot more discussion that needs to go in all of these, but
100%.
in terms of the buckets. I think this is where it lands, and depending upon how some things come in, you may have the funds to move it around. You're gonna have to submit stage 2 with these projects and these values. Then adjust as you need to afterwards.
Don, I know that I think you and I talked about this casually, but about how if we wanted to get the high school gym piece done on time, you'd have to use the middle school gym as swing space for sports potentially.
Depending on when that work happened.
Yeah.
And we did talk to somebody who does the gym floors and bleachers, and it's our high school gym is one of the biggest gyms in the state. So the bleachers would have to come out first, the flooring would have to come out, they'd have to bring in the new flooring, it'd have to sit there for a little while and sort of acclimate to the humidity in the pressure within the room, and then they would be able to lay it down. It's like a summer slammer kind of project, but it probably would have to start in June, maybe even in May, to get through the summer. It's gonna be done by the time school gets started. So there may be sports that, like for example, volleyball is a spring sport. We'd have to potentially find places for volleyball.
Mhm.
The annex might be better.
The annex, we updated the gym for the Smoke Haven gym.
Yep.
But
Just be the players.
Yeah, I think that's just
I don't know
one
how many
note to
people
think
watch
about, we
volleyball.
think about the timing. If we do need that, but I guess if you're just doing bidding, you're not starting the gym, then you might be okay. And then my other question was, for not Western, or I guess I'd say for the elementary schools. Will Russ help fill in what the detail will be for these, or what's the next step for putting more detail to that?
Yeah, so we did an assessment, so we kind of know where some of the things were, but Russ may have done a number of those things already, so. Between now and when we make this resubmission, we would want to sit down with Russ and say, what are the real high priority deferred maintenance? Like he might say, man, we're gonna lose that boiler any day now. So that would be one of those deferred maintenance items.
so we definitely look at our capital improvement.
I said, yeah.
Mhm.
And then, sorry, my other question was the kitchen cafeteria renovation addition. That's the one you mentioned where it's turning the library in the front of the school into that new cafeteria kitchen, and then moving the library somewhere else. Okay,
So temporarily, you would move the library unless there is additional capacity at the middle school to maybe grab another room somewhere. You could move the library to where the cafeteria was.
or
Really,
media center.
yeah, the media center to where the cafeteria was, because this is just the first step. Like, let's go to the next slide for a second, Brian. We can go back to this. Oh, well, these were just a breakdown of the things. We can quickly go through this. That's the Western Washington Oak. Yes. Here. So discussions on path forward. So, what are your reactions to the scope of work and the allocation of this budget? I think we all need to rally behind a message or a strategy for the bond vote. Because although this has been reduced to 25, doesn't mean you have it, by the way.
Mhm.
So, we had come up with not a slogan, but this is what our suggestion is that you need to present this as your first step to improving your school facilities. This is not one and done.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I like that.
We're renovating the kitchen, basically.
You're making your first steps, which, and I've used this phrase before, do no harm, long range.
Mhm.
And if you ever want to do anything at that middle school, you need to knock off all that stuff that's in the back. All the stuff in the back is where your kitchen and cafeteria is. It's already not working for you. let's put something at the front of the building that'll look new, that people see when they come in. You know, look exciting, the gym, the captain. It looks like you're making your first step to improving your school facilities. And then we talked about the importance of project delivery, so Russ can manage some of this work as it goes forward. And then, you know, I really don't know where we would stand with incentives yet. You almost need to, I wouldn't say you almost need to take that off the table, but that's really not a discussion point. We got 25 million. You need to resubmit in September. Let's see what the legislature does at the end of June about extending things. And then I can tell you, okay, you can grab this, this, and this. And boost your incentive, your reimbursement from what it is to, you know, what the potential is.
What about PAYGO? Do we get any?
So you'll still get a PAYGO amount. We'll have to recalculate it based on 25 million. There's a PAYGO calculator. We can quickly do that.
And at this point, are you kind of using it for, oh, shoot, this came up, something like the boiler or overages and things like that?
Well, the PAYGO will really be how you all decide to use it. Some towns use it to pay some bond costs in the beginning. Some people use it to pay early fees from either engineering or consulting. Or some have those emergency projects that they put it towards.
Because PAYGO is just the state fronting us money. It's not free money.
It's not free money, no, it's
The
just
state
money that
funding
you
us.
get early.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting for reimbursement.
Yeah.
I'll show you where it is.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
That's okay. Thanks for
So, you know, this is terribly disappointing, right? Because we were all looking for a much larger impactful project. But I think I don't want to say quickly put it aside, but put it aside because this is what we have to work with. And I don't need any final answers tonight. I'm just presenting this to you as what the expectation should be going forward.
Ask a couple questions.
Sure.
So at Western, that amount of money, the 1.25 million, is that going to include piping throughout the building? Or is just the well
Well, so.
and the other things?
Yes, so we can look at that more and see how far we can stretch that 1.25 million. If there's a grant that can help with some of this, that
Right.
means
Because they,
that money may be able to go farther.
the piping in that entire building, if you can fix that well as many, you know, make it deeper, get more water from it, whatever. If you don't fix the piping, the water is still not coming up there. So.
So just overall plumbing.
Yeah, through the whole building, like at every one of the sections. It is a discolored water for a number of reasons. And that's one of them is the
And I wonder too, to me, what's very disturbing is the lack of staff restroom too. I don't know if that's even an option.
That's my next one on here. My next one on here is two other things that I'm concerned about that I'm gonna speak as a taxpayer right now, not just as a school employee, but like bathrooms, like there's one bathroom, one stall for the entire staff in that building. I'm not just advocating for Western, by the way, I could go to many schools, it's just the one I really know, is one bathroom, one stall. And then they have off to the side, like a kindergarten bathroom, like literally this big that the staff sits on in that bathroom, so I just wanna say that, and then paving across all of the schools, like. There's major paving issues across every one of the schools, so I'm just throwing these out there as things like. I understand like interior finishes are pretty and they're gonna jazz up the place and make people feel good about it, but. Like there's functional things, I think, every day that people have been living with for years and years and years. That I think we have to say, you know, we need bathrooms, we need paving, we need those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think some of the parking lots are actually dangerous.
Yeah, that exactly. I think there's like sidewalks, like the sidewalks that the kids come into school have, like are all.
I completely agree, which is why I said that the selection of an OPM here is gonna be important.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to pay me to fix some sidewalks. These are things that your facilities guy with a little bit of help can get on their own So they're saving, percentage points on this money.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. What happens at these elementary schools? That's why it says interior finishes or deferred maintenance. At Washington Oak, that's all I said was site work. This would be
Yeah.
paving. So that's why there's a big conversation with Russ over this chunk of work in the middle.
Yeah.
That you may not need me to do.
Throwing out some
Yeah.
ideas of something that like are just, I think like, warm side, warm, dry, safe,
Mhm.
kind of things that I think we have to think of. We're doing a lot of other things on here, but I'm hoping we consider some of those things. The other thing I'll say is, and I'll just bring this up because this has come up as conversation is, the town council has asked us about class sizes, right? When you are spread across 5 elementary schools, I know that it doesn't sound like you should be able to close something here or whatever. It's really hard, just take it, for example, if there's 320 students in a grade, right? That is, and they're across the 5 schools. And remember, these are everybody's home schools, like that's 16 classrooms, that's 20 students in a classroom. And I know the limit is 23 in K to 2, and in 3 to 5 it's 25. That's 20 kids in that classroom. You would have to, if you were to try to, increase class size or close some classrooms to move, it's so super hard to do that when you're across 5 schools. So think about that, just to close one room of 20, right? You would have to think about where they're located in that particular district. You'd have to move those kids to other schools. And then if they have brothers and sisters, there has to be room for them too, to go, or you'll have kids in multiple schools. So like, I think sometimes people think when you look at class size, it's a super easy like math thing. If 320 kids, you can increase that classroom by 3 because you only have 20 at an average in there. You can't do that when you're in the elementary schools because they're across 5 schools. So there's busing issues, there's sibling issues, there's all kinds of things that impact that. And right now, we're at the cusp of having max sizes in a lot of classrooms. So I just wanted to also reiterate that efficiency, when we are saying we have 5 schools and we talked about consolidating, we could make it 14 classes if things were consolidated. I know we're not going back there, but I just don't want people to keep thinking that efficiency is easy when you're across 5 schools versus putting all grade 3 to 5 in one school. So I just think it's important for me to say that as a person who's kind of handling the numbers and being asked for class size, and it isn't this simple like math number. Just divide it by the number of 23 into 320, you only need 14 classes. We can't do that. It impacts families, it impacts who you move across 5 schools. So, sorry, I just wanted to say that too. And then the final thing that I wanted to say is, if I remember correctly, we get a 50% of automatic or 48, whatever. What is the
Reimbursement,
Reimbursement.
49?
I thought it was 48,
I think it's 47 and change.
Yes, I just rounded it to 50%. So I just want to make sure I understand this too. On a $25 million project, so 12.5 million is what we're ultimately going to end up being responsible for, right?
Yeah, you will get reimbursed the other 11.5.
Right, well,
Interest doesn't get reimbursed though.
Right, I understand that. So that piece of it, and on a big project, I'm just gonna make sure I understand this too, that if we had done an $80 million project, right, or $100 million, it was 30 million, right, that we were gonna end up ultimately paying.
Yeah, because you were eligible
At a high-
for incentives.
Okay.
When-
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I just want to make sure that I got that on my head.
I think,
For $18 million more, we would have had a lot more.
Like the overall efficiency over years, like of closing schools, of doing all those things.
well, I don't, the issue doesn't go away, right? And here's why I think you have to be mindful when you sell this to the community. I would only focus on the improvements that you're really making at the high school and the middle school, even though you're doing other stuff. I wouldn't make that a big deal. Because within the next, I'll say 10 to 15 years, when you go back out again and you decide to consolidate these elementary schools, included in that is going to be a new building in Western. Right, you know what I mean? But I guess what I'm saying to you, if you come back to me 10 years from now, I'm gonna come back to you and say, consolidate the 3 elementaries, and by the way, if you need to pass this bond, you're gonna be putting a new small elementary school in Western. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Unless for somehow the community has changed and everybody's moved all over on this side. I don't.
I would
but I'm
focus
just
on the
saying,
safety issues for the other elementary, so say we're making them safer,
Yep.
you know, and I think that will resonate with.
I think with a bond of this size, you know, it's hard for, I think, a voter to say no to sprinklers that make a building safer, no to a roof that's leaking and compromised, and no
Clean
to a
water.
well.
Yeah,
You know, and a system to provide clean drinking water to
children.
students. So I think it's hard to say no to those things. Anything else that we can add to it that brings some, and this is something Mario had said, some attention to, what good and nice things.
Don, didn't you get a quote on what it would be to replace the chairs and the carpet in the auditorium?
Yeah, I was gonna get to that.
Because that's something that's very public facing
Yeah.
and it's used by the community.
I mean, I can throw that in now, so. Once our bond situation changed, and I talked to Mario. And I started talking about with him about strategy, like strategically, what do we need to do as a community? And he said, you really probably should focus on your middle school and your high school. Because those are the places that all your kids are gonna go through, they're the big community hubs, like really put a lot of money and attention there. So if you recall from previous meetings, I had shared with you that we had an equipment/furniture grant and an arts grant. That we were looking to spend a few different ways, but once I knew this project was kind of like shifting. I pulled in some people to come to our auditorium and said, you know, if I pool this money into one bucket. Could I get new chairs and carpet? And so we had a chair guy come and bring chairs for us to look at and take measurements and, you know, he's gonna create a diagram. And basically a blueprint of what we would put there to replace our chairs. And then we had somebody come in and measure out for carpet. And to see what we have budgeted. We also have some other money that, there was a fund started at the high school by the previous principal, maybe even the principal before that, that was specifically for chair replacement, and he was putting just a little bit in at a time every year in his school restricted account. That money is also available. It's not a lot, it's like $60,000, but if we put all those 3 together, we might be able to do that project. That requires 0 funding or anything from the bond or from the taxpayers, but it does have a wow factor. And we're actually accelerating the timeline if we can to get it approved. Because Brian has to approve it by the end of this fiscal year and to actually have the project done over next December break.
Okay.
So that would be a fast one and hopefully very impactful because a lot of people use that auditorium and it's in need of help. And so people would see something nice and maybe be able to realize that, you know, we deserve nice things in Coventry and it's what it looks and feels like.
Maybe we could have next year's financial town meeting.
A nice
At the
fancy
high school.
auditorium.
Well, so
We
people
don't
could see
have
it.
financial time.
Well, our budget hearing.
Well, I would say this, we have two theater performances typically a year. In my mind, I was like, well, the first one will happen before the renovation and the second one will happen after the renovation. And I think that's where you're gonna get that sort of like wow factor, because the first show is gonna be in the old theater with the old carpet and chairs. And I'm not sure where our timeline will be in terms of the sound and lighting improvements, but the second show will be potentially in a brand new space. I've heard people talk about other schools in the area that have much nicer auditoriums. So for kids that are into theater and music and the performing arts, they want to be in a space that is, you know,
Yeah.
conducive to their talents.
I do think that by improving both the auditorium and the gym, you've really hit a lot of different students. Which is nice.
And and public sees in
Yeah.
those cases, but. So, what are we looking at for action items from here? I see we have that slide up, based on the schedule.
Sure, so the next couple things to do would be, confirm the scope of work. Right, try to identify more at the elementary schools, what those high priority items are. Then develop and submit stage 1 in September.
Page 2.
I'm sorry, stage 2 in September with a December approval. Aggressively ramp up your bond campaign using the back to school time, really. Then on voter approval, we release us to do the work at the high school and the middle school so that we could get some costs back by the end of June.
I also will connect with, to confirm the date that we need to have the ballot language approved by the town council and start the timeline for preparing for the election. And then we can get dates for when early voting is and all that stuff. So I'll talk to them this week. I think it's gonna end up being on an agenda in July for the council.
Which is soon.
Which is soon.
And then, Don, it sounds like you'll work with Russ and Phil to fill in more detail for the elementary school.
Yeah, well, that is, our capital list has, like, the paving is on the capital list, so there's a few things on our list that are urgent that we probably would want to address as soon as we can.
And this is still for an October 3rd, right?
That's been pointing towards.
Just want to confirm.
What happens to the money that they require us to spend for maintenance? Hey, don't they have that requirement that's like $2.3 million or something?
Yeah,
3% of your operating.
Yeah, so right now it's built into our budget. With, you know, having impact fees coming and housing aid coming. But I do think if we do this project, you know, this applies to some of that requirement, so that will help us meet the maintenance requirement from the state.
But like I said, we should
Still need to invest.
we should still be making capital spends each year and not just relying on what this covers,
Mhm.
because work should still be done. But
There should just be a way to ramp it up more slowly. So that we can get to that place where we're at the 3%.
Right.
And just gives us a little more time to get there.
I think, right, I think you're both right, like, I think capital improvements have to continue to happen, but if we can create a little bit of a buffer, because we know that the requirement for the maintenance is being met by this. We can kind of ramp ourselves up without being in a really tight budgetary situation one year after another. We can walk and chew gum at the same time, right, we can do this.
I might encourage you to maybe with Russ, sit down with our new grant writer. And throw your capital list at her and see if any of those, or anything that would be included in this. Is something that maybe she has her nose toward, or has her ears up for anything in particular. Anything that, any little
Yeah,
bit counts.
Anything that helps fund it.
There are a ton of federal grants out there for
Yeah,
these projects. If you have someone who can acquire.
Mhm.
Yeah, let's spend this money as
Don,
wisely
do
as
you
we
have her
can.
contact information, Lisa's? All right, we.
I'll send it to you. Send it to you tonight.
Thank you, Phil. Appreciate that. We kind of already talked about the project schedule, I would say. So was our next item. Marketing strategy. I don't know if we can so much firm that up yet when we don't have a lot of detail for some of these. But I know that you have a committee together with some parents to start, right?
Yeah, I guess what we need to decide is, you know, when we were talking about a much bigger bond and a much, I think, more involved sales approach, we were thinking about partnering with somebody who does this for a living. I don't know if we still want to do that. I don't know if we have the funding to do that. I don't.
I think we should still solicit some funds. I don't think we can't sleep on this town with even a $25 million.
Mhm.
That's just my opinion. I think we need to act like this is not guaranteed. We can't make any assumptions. So to me, like before, when it was a bigger bond and we were thinking we'd need like 10 grand in marketing. I mean, maybe it's even like 3 to 5. I think that still gets you, that helps with your consulting fees. I think your printing costs, because to me, there's going to be a lot of push around your open houses. If this is an October vote, maybe you consider moving up your open houses into September.
Most of them are done, but we can make sure they're all done by.
Because that to me is where you're going to make a big play, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think through the school, you can get that really push, whether it's the PTOs, the open houses. I mean, parents alone can push this over the finish line
Yep, and there's.
outside of everybody else.
There's summer orientations, you know, at the different schools where kids come in and families.
But I do think we need a professional that will help us with. A tagline, like you kind of talked about the first step piece, the tagline, the consistency in messaging. That helps establish what the, say, 3 to 5 main selling points are. I do think something like that's important.
I think.
I don't, because if we just say we'll get to it, I'm afraid it's gonna be last minute. And that's not a comment on anybody, I just think it's something we should invest in.
I think even
more.
something like a QR code where if someone comes for an orientation or an open house, they can click so that we can get their information. So that when it comes closer to the vote, we can reach out to them by email or in ways like that, because I think, I notice that you give people information 2 months out, 2 weeks out. You need to give it to them day of. So to make sure that anybody who came and expressed any sort of interest is then able to be reached out to. I mean, during last year when we did vote on the bond, you wouldn't believe how many people talking to at lacrosse to say, go vote. And they're like, oh yeah, And it's like,
And that's us doing the text message blast.
Yeah.
The mobile blast and email blast.
so you have to hit people multiple times. And I think something short money marketing strategy to get us emails, to get us contact information so that we can reach out multiple times.
Don, I think you and I had conversations about getting to hire people. I think you were close and you had someone in mind from last time. I don't know if you want to re-engage them, and I think we're looking at we'd probably start with them in July, late July.
Yeah, so we had a few conversations, when Luke was chairing the committee. He had brought somebody in who was involved in the East Providence project. And if I recall, that he pitched sort of like what it would look like, and I think there was even a dollar amount attached to that pitch. Which I want to say was between the $11,000 and $15,000 range, if I remember correctly. But then we also talked about some other people who do this work. That we might be able to partner with them through a parent organization. And they might be able to help solicit donations. From, the different trades and the different people who would benefit from a project. And, use that as a way to get, the funding needed to get the word out.
Okay, maybe for their next meeting, we can bring a draft letter for donation solicitation. And we as a group can review it, and then that's something that now we can give to the parents, or you guys can work with.
I have 2 or 3 parents that I had spoken to that would be interested, and it doesn't preclude anybody from here who wants to be part of that as well. But, when I talked to Don Anderson about what they need to do, and I think I'm probably repeating myself, but they basically have to sort of like incorporate themselves like a PAC, like a campaign.
Yep.
And we have somebody who said that they would do the finance part of it in terms to make sure that the accounting and the ethics commission stuff is all up and up.
It's actually easier to file and start a PAC than it is to start like a personal campaign.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah,
Which also wasn't that hard.
no, but I'm just saying, in terms of a lift for a parent or something like that.
I feel like, Elliot, are we voting on anything?
No,
We're good?
Yep.
All right.
thank you.
And, just as far as I'm concerned with this amount of bond, it's really up to you guys how we spend it. Like, I think what the schools need more than I would ever be able to know what the schools.
All right. So, yeah, I would say the barometer for the marketing piece is. We should have solicitations out by at least late next month in June for donations.
So that means we really need to be nailed down on what the project is in terms of everything, in the.
Well, we should anyway, because the vote from the council on the bond language is gonna be in July.
If we start soliciting for donations next month.
For the capital campaign.
For the capital campaign, we need to be really firm on what it is that we're asking for and, what that goes towards.
Okay. For next meeting. It gets tough because this time of year is like, I was looking at June 7th, but that's graduation.
Right.
Do we wait till the 14th? Or? You could meet on the 31st, I'm just away. I would hope if we didn't waited 3 weeks instead of just the 2, then we'd have a pretty fleshed out detail on the specifics of the projects at the elementaries.
I mean, wait, so the 7th is graduation. So
Yep.
I personally could do the 31st or the 14th. If we do the 14th, it just gives us a little bit more time to get that parent group organized. I could probably have an offline meeting with Phil and Russ.
Yep.
To get some of our capital stuff cross-referenced.
And then once you have that, if you have it ahead of the 14th, you can probably connect with Lisa
Yeah.
and she can start taking a look too at what she can maybe knock off. And maybe it's not just the bond list, but maybe it's the capital list you guys had too.
When's the town council meetings in June?
The
13th.
13th and the 27th.
So we would be presenting something at the 13th or the 27th?
Presenting one.
Anything that the town council would want to know what we're doing.
Yeah, probably the 27th.
So we'll meet on the 14th. And we'll go to the town council on the 27th. Just with an overview, like a scope. And then I'll try to plan something maybe between now and the 14th with.
Yeah, I think there'll be a couple meetings. Yeah. This.
And then I would say maybe this summer at some point. We could have a separate meeting with maybe administration at all the schools ahead of the open house period, so that way. Or not even open house, but just to give them just help them understand what projects are gonna be done at their schools, start laying the seeds with each school leadership. And then lay the foundation from there for the marketing and how they can help.
Yep, and then we also, beginning of the year, we have time in front of our staff. For the opening day, we did that a few years ago. So we could, because the last thing that staff, I mean, much of the staff knows what's going on in town, but. Some of the staff have no idea that this project is not the same project that I shared with them.
Yep.
A few months ago, so we're gonna have to revise again, and so. I wanna be as tight on that as I possibly can. But-
And if we have it, and by the time you present to them, if we've already engaged public relations or marketing and it's the projects become branded,
Mhm.
that's even better.
Yeah.
So now the teachers are getting the first glimpse of the, the polished up messaging.
How many people normally come over for a referendum? 2,500 people or so?
Our budget referendums had an average of 2,400 to 2,600 people.
So again, if you just push it to the schools and get the parents to show up, I mean, that should push it over the top alone.
You would think, but I'd say
Really?
the parent,
Unless
the parent population is the toughest to get out on referendum.
Really,
days.
yeah.
you get an organized group that wants to push against it,
It's really easy.
it's easy to mobilize enough people. to get
Alright.
it shut down.
So,
That's why I'm saying we still need to engage a marketing professional. Don't sit on our laurels.
Yeah, and we're also gonna have to do some work on our website, because our website has been really just a holding place for meeting agendas.
No, like I said, I want to do what Cranston does, where it says like, this is phase 1, and then phase 2 would be that, so that way people can see. Why this is just the first step.
And I guess, in line with what one of the speakers said at the town council meeting last night, in terms of planning forward. If we're honestly thinking there's gonna be a phase 2 or phase 3. I guess we really need to think long and hard about like. Where we predict the financial status of this town will be at that point. Otherwise, we're just doing the same thing again, you know what I mean, like, if we truly believe in 10 years, things are gonna be much better, and that we could pass a large bond, and that's a realistic thing, then we could definitely build towards that. But if we don't think in 10 years we're gonna be, you know, a whole lot better off, then really. We're not being honest to ourselves or other people, if we're saying there's gonna be another phase, when we know it's never gonna, we're never gonna be able to go for it.
Mhm.
You know, I just don't wanna be that guy that promises something that never happens.
Yep.
How long do you retire?
12 years.
Who's counting?
I'm gonna go there 13 years from now.
So your window must be 15 years.
Yeah,
That way you have an out. It wasn't me. I'm out.
I just need a plaque with my name on it.
Don's audition.
2020.
Okay, so June 14th is our next meeting, June 27th is presentation of town council.
Yep.
All right, public comments. Okay. At this time, I will take a motion to adjourn at 7:27 PM. Motion, do I have a second? Second. All those in favor?